Today we're going to be taking a look at Chris Rosser's new AOS 5 version 5 frame, as well as his AOS Supernova 2207 motors. Now this isn't really a review as such, because more than anything it's going to be an overview of these products. Then there's going to be a part 2 of this video where I actually finish the build and take them for a fly. That's going to be about a week to 10 days behind this one, simply as a result of the weather here. But if you're interested in seeing that, please do make sure you are subscribed. Now, just before we get into it, I just want to say a big thank you to Chris for sending these over. He did not pay me. He did not ask me to make this video. He simply sent these over for me to take a look at, and I decided to share with you my opinions on them as a result. Anyway, let's get on with it, and let's take a look at the new AOS 5 version 5 first of all. Okay, so the frame kit comes in this bag like this from CNC Drones. This has all the parts in we need to get it up and running. Now, just to walk you through what that is, I'm just going to try and find where there's an end. There isn't one specifically, so we're going to tear into the bag. You will see the various parts are actually sticking through. Let's just get it all out, and then we'll take a look at each of the bits individually in a moment. So we've got our top and bottom plates located there. We've got our center piece, which is there. We then have our 4 arms that come in a separate bag. Let me just get them open. And again, we'll take a closer look at these in a second, measuring them up. They're all there. The first thing you'll notice is that these are no longer that truss design. They are now a single arm design, much thicker than we had before. We've then got some plates. So we've got our carbon fiber mounts, 2 different types for mounting our cameras, and we've then got our metalwork for the front. So we've got our CNC aluminium front end plates, as well as our standoffs in the same color, blue here. And then we've got our bag of screws. Now, taking a look at the frame parts in a little bit more detail, starting with the bottom plate, because this is the real area of interest where a lot of the work has gone on. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that there are press nuts installed as standard. For instance, there are press nuts for the flight stack. You've got a 30 by 30 as well as 20 by 20 mounting pattern, but there are also press nuts for the arm mounts. That is just to offer some additional strength as well. The next thing you'll notice around the stack mounting area are these cutouts. Now this is Chris's patent pending vibration isolation system. The way Chris has always designed his frames in the past is to try and reduce as much vibration as possible. What Chris is doing here though is taking that to the next level. He's now trying to prevent as much of the vibrations that are there from getting to the flight stack area. So whilst the frame has very low vibrations in itself, the idea of this is to reduce what vibrations there are from making it to the flight stack. And Chris says that this could reduce vibrations making it to the flight stack by as much as 50%. Now, looking around the rest of the bottom plate, there are lots of mounting options. So we've got 2 areas to mount our VTX or our air units. You've got a 30 by 30, 25 by 25 and 20 by 20 mount on both sides, giving you a huge amount of flexibility. Moving over to the top plate, now there isn't a great deal to show you here other than we do have an XT60 mount built into the frame, which is really nice to see. It's going to make installation nice and clean. There's another mount up here. I'm not sure right now what that is for. Probably a GoPro mount, I guess. We'll take a look at that a bit more later on. But you will also notice that there are no horizontal cutouts in this top plate or the bottom plate, I may add. And that is because, as I mentioned earlier, rather than using carbon fiber standoffs, Chris has now moved over to aluminium standoffs. These are fully compatible with pretty much any FPV camera on the market. They are digital ready in the sense of you do have different mounting options available. You've got some carbon fiber plates which are solid. There's plates that will take a silicon or a TPU insert, and what I would say is this frame is absolutely O3 ready, but it will take the original DJI FPV system as well as analog or any of the other FPV systems on the market. Finally, moving over to the arms, and the first thing you'll notice is that the A-frames are gone and he's now gone to a single arm setup. Now these are made of very thick carbon fiber. I believe it's 6mm, but we will measure it in a minute just to confirm, which should offer plenty of strength. Now, just looking at the thicknesses of the plates, if we start with the bottom one and then go in, you can see we're getting 2.5 mil on that one. If we move over to the top plate, 2 mil on that one. The filler piece for the arms, 2 mil. And then if we move over to the arms themselves, bringing it right out, you can see we're up to 5.9, so 6 mil on them. Now, obviously, that extra thickness in the arms is going to offer a huge amount of rigidity, the strength. Obviously, there is always weak point on every quad arm. There isn't a quad out there that won't break in a crash, but with this design on this thickness, it should offer plenty of stability, but not losing anything as a result of moving from that A-frame down to the single truss. Now, alongside his new frame, Chris has his AOS Supernova motors. Now, these are specifically designed for his AOS 5 frames, but any 5-inch quad as well. They are labelled as 2207 in size with 1980 kV specification, making them ideal for 5-inch freestyle 6S quads. Now, these motors are based on Chris's in-house motor testing. He says that they will offer more thrust, better efficiency and more torque than other motors available on the market. Looking at the motors in more detail, they are 1980 kV, designed to be used with 5 to 6S. They feature an aluminium unibell design with an extra thick flux ring, not only offering extra durability, but also performance as well. They are a 12N 14P configuration with single strand wire with 260 degrees C enamel, meaning that they certainly shouldn't be an easy motor to smoke in the event of a crash. They feature a 4mm hollow shaft and the motors are 27.6 by 19.5 in size and weigh 31 grams without the wires. Chris has designed these motors to offer as much performance as possible, and as a result of that, they are capable of drawing up to 61 amps. Now, these motors are designed by Chris and manufactured by RCM Power and are some of the highest quality motors that I have seen on the market today. Okay, now before we mount these motors on a frame, I just want to show you what you get included in the box. Now, they do come in this nice hard plastic case, which is nice to see. When you take it out, the motor's held in place in foam. You've got the motor itself there with a nut pre-fitted, ready to go. And then there's just a little bag of screws, which include another spare nut, always good to have, as well as 2 different lengths of screws, depending on your frame. Now, you're going to need to be careful with the screw length, as you would on any motor, to make sure that if you're using the long ones, you do need them and they're not going to damage the windings. This is the case on any motor that you install on a frame, so do make sure that you carefully check the depth of the arm versus the screw and the motor to ensure that you're not going to do any damage. Now, just to measure the length of the wires included with the motor, we're going to do it on my trusty Mads Tech ruler. We're going to place the motor there at the point of the end of the heat shrink tubing, and then we're going to stretch it out, and you've got 14 centimeters in length in total. I'll do it in inches for our American friends in a minute as well. But yeah, from that point there, 14 centimeters. And then if we do it in inches, for those who don't know how to convert, like me, you're getting 5.5 inches on that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Chris labels these motors 2207. However, there is a little bit of controversy around this aspect in the sense of the motor isn't actually 2207. Now, I had some comments on this, as did other people, that just sort of questioned why label it something that it isn't. And I asked Chris specifically why he chose to do that, and I'm going to share with you his response next.
Hi there, Ian. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to clarify a little bit on the naming of the Supernova 2207. In my launch video, I explained that the motor's not exactly 2207 in size. In fact, the stator has a slightly larger volume than that. The reason that I called it a 2207 is for 2 reasons. The first is categorization. I wanted to make sure that retailers would list it in the correct section of their website next to other 2207 motors that it should be compared against, because it weighs the same as a 2207 and it's designed to do exactly the same job. The second reason is to minimize confusion. I wanted to make it very clear to anyone who's looking at the motor for the first time, who's maybe unfamiliar with me and hasn't watched any of my videos. I wanted them to know exactly what the motor was designed to do just from the name. And I think I've achieved that. It's clearly designed to be a powerful 5-inch motor. That 2207 name kind of communicates that. And that, I think, makes the name very user-friendly, which was the goal. And And I guess I erred on the side of user friendliness rather than absolute accuracy on the precise dimensions of the motor. So I hope that that's clear. That was my reasoning behind it. And I think overall, the response that I've got from people is that they kind of understand from the name what the motor is designed to do. And so that's sort of achieved the goal that I set out for in terms of the name being really user friendly.
Now, the question you will obviously have is, so what is the actual size of the motor? And I'm not going to tell you today. That isn't because Chris has asked me not to. And in fact, he said, if you want to show people what it is, please don't be afraid to do so. But it's because now I know what the number is, I don't feel it's that much of a big deal. The motors are labelled as 2207s. That isn't a huge difference from what they actually are, in the sense of they are not labelled as 2207 or are actually 2308 or something like that. The motors are within the point number of the original number, which is 22 point something by 07 point something. The question comes is, how far down the line do you go with labelling the motors different numbers? So should a motor that's, say, 22.5 by 07.5 be labelled a 23 by 08 number? This all gets rather complicated, and whilst I was the first to shout foul when I first heard about this, now I know the number, there is some semantics here. Yes, other motors may be exactly 2207. These are not, but what it isn't is a dramatic difference over the others, and what you're getting is what Chris is calling a 2207 class motor, and you're getting some good performance as a result of the changes he's made. But this all comes down to ifs and buts. But what if other motors with the same size as this, would they have the same performance? The reality is, what Chris has said is he's been able to deliver a motor that offers better torque, better performance in a size around 2207, but the standard weight of what you would find from a 2207 motor. Now, before we move on, I just want to comment a little bit about my thoughts on the fit and finish and the quality of this motor. I have to say, these feel very, very nice. The quality is as good as anything else that I've seen on the market, exactly what you would expect from the likes of RC and Power, because they are the people manufacturing them. The colour scheme Chris has gone with on this motor is just phenomenal. The blue and gold just pops. It looks fantastic. Yes, it's not about how a motor looks, it's about how it performs, but I have to say his choice here is just phenomenal. Overall, there really isn't anything bad to say about this motor with regards to the fit, finish and feel. Yes, this is a very expensive motor. It is right up there with the very best with regards to cost. However, you are getting a very high quality motor with that price as well. Next, we're going to get the new AOS frame together, get the motors installed, and give you an overview of how it looks once it's assembled. Now, I suspect Chris is going to do an assembly video. However, I'm going to just walk through it here. I don't actually know how to do it at this point, so you're going to be seeing me do this in real time, but it doesn't look particularly difficult. So we have our arms, which all pretty much look the same, if I am correct. Let me just stack them. Yeah, they are all cut exactly the same. And the way it looks like it goes is if I place that there, that one there, that one there, and that one there. And what we can then see is that we've got the holes for the arms going through the holes on the frame there, which goes into the press nuts. They then meet in the middle for that hole that's on either side there, and then it leaves that cutout area free in the middle to move with the flight stack, and then we have a bottom plate which simply goes over the top like that. We're then going to take this 16mm screw, pop it through the arm, and start tightening that down into the base plate, into that press nut. And what I'm going to do is just start to tighten them in on each of the corners. Okay, I'm next going to take the 12mm screw, so checking that on the caliper, and then we're going to put one in each side. I'm assuming it's the 12 for this, because what makes sense to me is the longer screws go onto the arms that would go through to the standoffs, and the shorter screws would only go through into the press nuts without the need to actually go all the way through. And then what I'm going to do is just tighten that down. So if we now look, you can see that the arm screws on the sides here have stopped there, whereas these ones have come all the way up. And then I will assume at this point we put our standoffs onto there, ready for our top plate. Now you'll notice I haven't put anything in for the flight stack. That's because I'm not doing that at this point. But don't worry, you can put the bottom plate on, and there are cutouts allowing you to get to them no problem at all. Next, looking to mount our standoffs. Now, just taking a look at these, they are identical. They don't appear to be handed, which is good, which means they will go on either side. So what I am guessing is they would simply pop on there like that. There are 2 screws on the bottom and a single screw on the top. And then, just taking a look, I'm going to predict that our top plate will go like that. And then the frame is pretty much built. So we simply need to mount them, mount our rear standoffs, and we're ready to go. Now, as I've mentioned several times, you have lots of options here for the mounting of your camera. They include some plates in the pack. So we've got these ones, which are designed to be used with silicon mounts or TPU. And then you've got solid plates here as well that you can use with traditional FPV cameras. And these can be mounted either on the outside like that there, or potentially on the inside, depending on your camera thickness. Now the cage has a gap in the middle of 26mm, or with these plates it will bring it down to 22mm when mounted on the inside. You though also have these plates, as I said earlier, which will take a TPU or silicon, and that will obviously allow all sorts of other options because the thickness of that can vary, allowing you to have cameras of whatever size you want. Now, you actually want to mount these plates before putting the frame together, as I've just found out. So what you simply do is take the plate off if you've already fitted it. If you haven't fitted it, you want to fit this first, then screw that in place. There's some little screws included in the kit with the frame. The carbon fiber pieces do have a countersunk side, so you can make sure that the screw does sit nice and flat. What we're going to do is just nip that up with the screwdriver. Not too tight, but just making sure that there's no movement. And then you want to do that on both sides before mounting your plate onto your frame, and then you're ready to go. Now, for the front mounting cage, they also include this standoff, which looks like it goes between there and there, just offering some additional strength. And then there are some smaller screws included for that, which will go through the aluminium into the standoff. That should hold it all nice and tight together. Now, with regards to installing the rear standoffs, everything's pretty straightforward, but there is something you need to be aware of. In the kit, you will have the standoff, you'll have your screw, which will pop through the frame, and then you will find that there are 2 little washers. Now, you need to place the washer either on the bottom or the top. I'm going to place it on the bottom on mine. This is just to add a little bit of height to the rear standoffs because they are not fitted on press nuts like the other standoffs further down in the frame. So for instance, if we look at that standoff there, you can see sits up just a little bit higher, whereas at the back there's no pressed nuts, so the washer is just to increase the height so the top plate remains flat. Now I'm at the point where it's ready for the top plate, or you would start to install the electronics. Now with regards to air unit and VTX compatibility, as I've said at the back, you've got 30x30, 25x25 and 20x20. However, it is worth noting that if you're going to try and use it with something like a DJI O3, that fits in the back fine, but you are going to need the longer cable. If I just show you this here, this is one of my O3 air units I'm just repairing. The cable is just a little bit too short to make it all the way to the front, so you are going to need the longer cable for the O3 air unit if you intend to install that in here, and that would stand as well for things like the Caddx Vista and anything else that you did want to install. Obviously, if you're using a smaller VTX, you could get that down in here. However, you're going to struggle with O3 to get that in there with everything else. Not saying it's not possible, but it wouldn't be a typical installation, and as such, you're going to want to get that longer cable, because if I just show you it there, it doesn't quite reach. Okay, so the build is complete. Now, it is very straightforward. As I've said, you simply mount your arms, your standoffs, doing the back standoffs, not forgetting the washers, mount your carbon fiber plates to your front plates first, and then mount them to the frame, and then mount the top plate and put your support piece in the middle. Now, height-wise, between the top and bottom plate, you've got 20mm from the top of the stack nut to the top plate, so you've got plenty there for most flight stacks. As I've said already, you've got your multiple mounting points at the back as well as the front for your VTX and your electronics, and then obviously you've got your single arms with our motor mounts on the ends. Next, we're going to take a look at getting this built up and then getting it out for a fly. Okay, so I've now got the motors installed on the frame, and that is pretty much as far as we're going to go with this today. Now, you can see these motors do match the blue on the front frame really, really well. Again, I do love this blue and gold color scheme that Chris has, and again, that then matches the blue frame aluminium on the front there. Chris will have it available in different colors. You can get black on the front if you want to. It isn't only blue that's available, but it does look really nice in this combination. Now, one last thing with regards to this camera mount is the mounts. Now, as I understand it, Chris is going to be including a pair of silicone mounts in with the kit. However, mine was a pre-release early version, and that didn't have the silicone mounts. What I've done is downloaded the STL file, which is available on Thingiverse. Chris has that on there, and then printed the mounts for the camera. I've printed them in TPU 95, and what you then do is simply pop them in on each side. So that one goes in like that, and then we can take the one on this side here, pop him in too, and then that gives the ideal size for the DJI camera. The mounts I've got here are the 1.75s, but they are available in different sizes as well. So if the silicone mount doesn't fit your camera, you can go on and download whatever size you need to fit your specific setup. Okay, now I just want to share with you some thoughts on where we're at here today. There's going to be a second video where I finish the build and then take it for its first flights and share with you my thoughts. Now, talking about the new frame, first of all, I have to say I think this is very, very nice. I really like the changes that Chris has made. I'm a big fan of the AOS series. I like those frames, and there are some good improvements here. I am pleased to see the end of the A-truss. It did have a habit of getting hung up in trees or on anything around it that it could get hooked on if you crashed. Moving to a standard arm setup just means that you might not have to end up going climbing if you do end up binning it. I think the improvements Chris has made look good. I like the aluminium front end. It's really good to see. The interchangeable inserts is great as well. Lots of options around cameras. Definitely optimized for O3 in that setup as well. And then you've got the multiple mounts, 30, 25.5 and 20.5 at the front and the back as well, which is great to see. Obviously, I cannot comment at this moment in time how well that new vibration isolation system works, and we're going to have to try and have an understanding of that as we move through the second video and have a look at how it actually performs. With regards to the AOS Supernova motors, they are very, very nice. There is no question that these are not a premium motor. However, you are getting a high quality RCM power motor for that money. I can't back up any of the claims Chris has made with regards to performance, the improvements, but I will share in the second video some thoughts on that stuff. But I am not someone who is a motor reviewer. I'm not dyno testing them. A lot of what Chris has said from his testing and the improvements he's made, to a point you're going to have to take his word for, or wait for someone to do sort of comparative testing on other motors. But what I am going to do is share with you opinion on them once I've had them in the air. I will say, from a visual point of view, they do look fantastic, and I really like the color scheme with the blue on the frame here. Yes, it's bling. Yes, it doesn't make a difference to how you fly. However, that doesn't mean it isn't a very nice looking quad. Now, if you're interested in getting these, I will put a link to them in the description. They are not affiliate links or anything like that. I'll put a link to Chris's AOS website, as well as some retailers or vendors that you can get these products. The AOS Supernova motors are already out there. You can order them, and the new frames will be available shortly. From me, I want to say a big thank you to Chris for sending these over. Chris did reach out and say, hey, would you like to have a look? There were no conditions attached. He didn't ask me to say anything specific. He didn't even say, hey, you need to make a video. He just said, I'd like you to take a look and tell me what you think. And this is what I'm sharing with you today as a result of that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, part 2 is going to be coming in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be doing it probably the week 10 days. I'm going to finish the build on this now, and then we'll be getting it in the air. So if you want to make sure you see that, please do make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I'm really interested in knowing your thoughts and comments on what you've seen here today. Any questions, put them down below and I will try and answer them too. And finally, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreons who support this channel. Everyone who either become a member of the channel via YouTube, supports on Patreon, or via Buy Me a Coffee. I would not be able to keep making content on this channel without the support of everyone who does do those things. And if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep making content in the future, please do consider checking it out. There will be links in the description. Anyway, that's it from me on this one. We will be back for part 2 soon. Stay safe. I'll speak to you soon.